Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of GOAT Movies, the podcast for the simple movie lover, where we discuss movies we've recently seen and see if they have what it takes to become the next greatest of all time. What makes a GOAT movie? Is it quotable? Is it lovable? Is it any-able? I'm your host Carlos, and you'll find that out today and more. It's been 11 years in the making, and we're back with a vengeance. Today we're reviewing Avengers Endgame. Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of GOAT Movies. I know it's been quite some time before I was able to get another podcast out, so I have to start off by saying I'm sorry. But thank you so much for still sticking around. I know I've gotten some emails from a lot of you listeners, so I really appreciate it. But we are definitely going to jump in, and we are jumping in right around the time that GOAT Movies actually turns 1 year old. So it was actually a year ago that we launched this podcast. On today's show, we have a returning commentator. We've got Jessica and her husband, Tim. What's going on?
Hey there.
Hey, what's up?
How are you guys doing?
Good.
So
excited to be here. Congratulations on 1 year.
Thank you. Well, the last time that you guys were on, we were actually covering the Han Solo movie, and it was actually your birthday, so go figure.
Yeah, I know. It's almost there.
Right? So excited for what we're going to be discussing today. On today's show, we also have another friend of mine, Brian Smith. What's going on, Brian?
Hey, Carlos. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about some of your favorite movies, what you're into.
Definitely a big Marvel fan recently. Long term, lots of 80s movies back when I grew up.
The 80s, those are some of the best movies of all time.
Yeah, I love cheesy stuff like One Crazy Summer. Stuff that like Demi Moore won't admit she was in.
I think there's a lot of 80s movies that a lot of actors choose not to acknowledge. But basically, it's those types of movies that got them to where they are today, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, another great thing is that we are right in the middle of, right in the beginning of May, which means only one thing for movie lovers. This is the time of year, I should say, when all the great movies start coming out. It's the summer movie time. I mean, I absolutely love this time of year. Are there any specific movies that you guys are really interested in seeing that haven't been released yet?
The Joker movie.
That one actually looks really good. I'm not a huge Joaquin Phoenix fan, but I'm really interested in their take on it. JB, you got anything?
I'm excited about, I think Godzilla looks good. I hope it's not cheesy, but the trailer itself looks good. And I'm a huge fan of the cheesy horror movies, so the next Annabelle that comes out, I'm excited about that because I love those movies.
Oh man. Those movies, I don't know, they just don't resonate very well with me. Brian, do you have any that are coming up that you're excited for?
I would definitely be interested in Spider-Man Far From Home, and I'm looking forward to the second part of it.
Ooh, I haven't actually seen the first one. I am not a fan of clowns, so I try to avoid those at all costs. I don't know.
Pretty good.
Some of the big names that are coming out this summer, we have Godzilla, King of the Monsters. We also have Rocketman, the Elton John movie, so that one actually I'm pretty excited for. We have the next installment in the X-Men franchise, Dark Phoenix, coming out. That one's pretty cool. And she actually just got married to Joe Jonas, so congratulations. We also have Men in Black International, Child's Play, Toy Story 4. The final Toy Story is what they've told me. You guys aren't excited for any of those?
Oh, yeah, Dark Phoenix for sure.
Absolutely.
Ooh, John Wick 3.
Ooh, John Wick 3 is also coming out. I'm really excited for that one. There's also
my niece is actually in that.
Is she really?
Yes.
Whoa.
What kind of role is she playing?
Oh, a background ballet role is my understanding.
Oh, that's funny.
You can get her on the show.
That's for sure. Like Brian said, I'm really excited for the new Spider-Man Homecoming, and I'm actually pretty excited to see the next Jon Favreau movie, The Lion King. I'm interested to see his take on the live action. Not as excited for the Aladdin film, because really, how can you replace Robin Williams as the genie?
No can do.
No. I mean, he was born to play that role. We've also got the remake of Child's Play coming, and we've got the new Quentin Tarantino Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Those are some pretty interesting movies that I'm looking forward to this summer. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. We're going to be talking about Avengers Endgame. And don't worry, there are no spoilers right now until after we issue the spoiler alert. I will, however, say that if you have not seen Avengers Infinity War, what are you doing listening to this podcast? Turn it off, go watch it, and then go watch Avengers Endgame. So I will give a small spoiler alert in case we have to do some references to the Infinity War movie, just because that's not what this podcast about. This podcast is about Endgame. So just that small spoiler alert right there. Jumping right into it, ladies first. Jessica, what do you think about Avengers Endgame? What did you think about it? How did you feel about the 3-hour-long movie?
So I went into it with pretty high expectations because, we've all been waiting, we've all been reading, we've all been trying to gather every scrap of picture or story of whatever the movie was going to be about. So I went into it with what I consider to be a ridiculously high expectation for a good movie. And I will honestly say when I left, it was better than I thought it was going to be, which I thought would be impossible, but it was better than I thought.
Oh, for sure. And that's one of the big things with me in movies. I go into a certain movie, I try to go in with no expectations whatsoever, but sometimes movies are built up way too much, which is why I really don't like talking about movies before people have seen them. And that's why I decided to do this podcast. Because now, if you really want to know about something, you want my honest take, I'm going to tell you about it here. But you're absolutely right. My expectations for this were pretty high, and I was not disappointed at all. I was actually very, very surprised of how into this movie I was. Brian, what did you think about it?
Oh, I loved it. I went back and saw it again last night to prepare for the podcast.
Man.
Very different experience the second time. Only cried one time.
I guess that's the next question. But before I get to it, Tim, what did you think?
I really liked it too. I went into it a little bit different than Jess did. I wasn't really sure how they were going to do it, but turned out great. I mean, I really liked the movie a lot better than I thought. And the 3-hour runtime went by a lot quicker than I anticipated too. It didn't seem like 3 hours.
Oh no, for us Marvel fans, that was absolutely not a 3-hour-long movie. And what's really funny is I have a running joke with some of my friends is my bladder actually dictates whether a movie is good or not. Because if I have to get up in the middle of a movie, it's probably not that good to begin with. I sat through the whole thing. I was at the edge of my seat the entire time. I was so super excited. So this leads into the next question. How many times have you guys seen it? I'm on number 3 myself.
We saw it twice.
And Brian?
As well. Twice.
You're already at twice. I was actually fortunate enough to be one of the screeners, so I got to see it before everybody else, and it was so difficult. For those of you who don't know, Brian and Jessica and I, we work together, but Brian sits right across from me, so it was very difficult for me not to say anything and not to have anybody to talk to this about, because I only had one ticket, so I couldn't invite anybody. It was really, really hard not to say anything, and like I said, I try not to build up people's expectations because I don't want the movie to be ruined for them. So once everybody got to see it, it was great. And then I remember, Jessica, you came into work, or actually you didn't come into work after the premiere, and I wasn't able to talk about it still. It was awful. I just couldn't believe it. I was messaging you, emailing you. I was like, how could you not be in the office today? I have nobody to talk to this about. And nobody else where I sit watches these movies, except for maybe Heather. So shout out, Heather.
Way to go, Heather.
Let's go ahead and cover just a little bit of the information. So this is a movie that's about 181 minutes long, 3 hours. As we were discussing, it's one of the fastest opening billion-dollar breaking movies that has ever been released. But this is 10 years in the making, guys?
At least, yeah.
If I'm looking at this correctly, Robert Downey Jr. was one of the first ones that, he is Iron Man, and that was the first movie that really kind of set the stage for the Marvel Universe. There was other hit and miss Marvel movies that came out before that, but this one really is the one where everything got started, and they couldn't have picked a better Iron Man. I mean, like we were saying earlier, you've got Robin Williams, who was made to play the Genie, and I don't think anybody else could have really played Tony Stark.
No, I think he was perfect for the way the MCU decided to portray Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm.
They gave him a lot of the stuff that belongs to other characters in the comics, but they made it work. And I think a lot of that was due to him.
And really, that goes for all of the casting. You've got Chris Evans as Captain America, Chris Hemsworth as Thor. I mean, Paul Rudd as Scott Lang. I mean, I absolutely love Paul Rudd. I don't think I've ever seen anything that I didn't like him in. Mark Ruffalo playing the Hulk. I know we've had a couple of Hulks. Overall, very, 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 very good casting. I really want to jump into the specifics of this, so I really want to issue our spoiler alert as soon as possible, but we always play the trailer first. Before we do that, I want to give you guys the opportunity to go ahead and give me your rankings. We always rank our movies on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely horrible, not worth your time to bootleg, absolute trash. 10 being absolutely amazing, definitely worth it. Go see it as many times as you can while it's in theaters. You have 0.5 that you can give just to give the movie a little extra oomph. And I always save my votes for the end because I don't want to influence anybody. So let's go ahead and start with you guys. Brian, what did you think? On a scale of 1 to 10, 0.5, wherever you want.
I'm going to have to go at least a 9.5. Had everything I wanted, had the emotional highs and lows. I got storylines wrapped up the way I wanted them to be. It hit all the notes for me. Acting was great. The directing was awesome. And there were so many little hidden tidbits in there for the Marvel fans, if you were fans of the movies or if you're fans of the comics.
Absolutely. Like you said, I feel like it comes full circle. I don't think that there were any real big unanswered questions. There's definitely some plot holes, and we'll discuss those in detail a little bit later. But it really, I think, comes full circle for everybody, especially if you're a Marvel fan. So absolutely. Jessica, where are you at?
I'd say that I'm probably at a 9. I thought it was awesome. It's definitely going to be one of my favorite movies probably ever. But yeah, I'd say I'm solidly at a 9. And it's not because there was anything wrong with it that I didn't give it a 10 or a 9.5. I really enjoyed it a lot. And if I were ranking it amongst, all of my favorite movies of all time, it's definitely up there, probably in the top 5, but I'd say solidly a 9.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Tim, where do you wrap this up in?
I'd be a little lower. I'd be an 8.5.
Really? Wow. I'm pretty interested for you to say that.
I liked Infinity War better. I thought the battle scenes in Infinity War were better than in Endgame. It was good. It was a great movie, and I saw it twice, and I'm buying the DVD, and I'm watching it over and over, but I didn't think it was as good as Infinity War.
Wow. Pretty interesting facts for you to be saying, so that's awesome. I'm going to have to agree with Brian on this. I'm going to have to give this a 9.5. Because of the plot holes that I noticed and that we're going to get into a little bit later, I can't give it that full 10. But I have to disagree with you, Tim. I thought that the battle scenes in this movie were absolutely great. I mean, I could have used a whole lot more. I absolutely, absolutely love this movie. And this is one of the very, very few movies that I have actually seen where, as I'm walking out and seeing the credits, that I tell myself, I know I'm going to watch this at least 2 more times in theaters. Now, Brian, you had said that this is your second favorite Marvel movie. What was your first favorite?
Winter Soldier, Captain America.
Really? 2. That's your favorite one?
Absolutely.
Wow. Tim, Jessica, yours?
Oh, it's hard to pick a favorite.
I would really like the first Iron Man. I thought it did a good job of the backstory. I liked everything about the first Iron Man. I liked Spider-Man Homecoming better, and Infinity War better, and maybe Black Panther.
Yeah, I guess if I had to pick a favorite, I really think it's the first Guardians of the Galaxy. I love that movie. I could watch it on a loop forever. I love that movie.
I think Guardians of the Galaxy and Iron Man 1 are definitely tied for first place for me. Absolutely. And in a very, very close second comes Endgame. I really enjoyed all of them. I don't know. The Black Panther, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good movie, but just like I was saying earlier, I think Black Panther is one of those movies that it just was not worth the hype. And for all intents and purposes, I really can't believe that it was nominated for an Oscar. I really can't.
I'll agree with that.
There was so many more better movies than that. And I know that the inner geek in me is like, what are you talking about? I mean, it's finally a hero movie that was nominated, but still, it's one of those movies that it was too much hype. While we're on that subject, what was one of your least favorite, like the absolute worst one that you've seen?
Does the original Hulk movie count?
Oh my gosh, that was
I
awful.
feel like you can't count that one because that is the worst one all the way around. So I feel like you can't count Hulk. You have to pick a different one.
You're referring to the one with what's his name? Banner.
Edward Norton.
No,
Edward Norton was the second one.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the one.
That's the one we're talking about. Because isn't the Eric Bana one not technically considered
that's
to
not
be
part
Marvel?
of the MCU.
Yeah, so only the Edward Norton one's actually part of the MCU.
But see, I thought you were talking about the Hulk in general. So, okay, so in that instance, yes, I understand what you're talking about. I hated the Eric Bana one. I was not a fan of the one with Edward Norton. So I completely agree with you on that one. Brian?
I find them all entertaining, but it's probably a toss-up for me between Thor: The Dark World, Iron Man 2, and Iron Man 3.
The sequels were definitely not as good as the originals. I have to give you that one. Thor: Dark World, I think, is one of those where we just kind of tend to try and forget about it. And you know my feelings on Thor Ragnarok. I think that movie was just, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it. They were trying way, way too hard to be funny. And in this one, in Endgame, I love the humor. I think it was very well executed, and the lines were great. It wasn't forced, and it just flowed. It was great. But I don't want to spoil it for everybody, so we're going to go ahead and play the trailer right now, after which we'll go ahead and issue our spoiler alert and jump straight into our conversation. So without further ado, here you go, trailer for Avengers Endgame.
God, seems like 1,000 years ago. I fought my way out of that cave, became Iron Man. Realized I loved you. I know I said no more surprises, but I was really hoping to pull off one last one.
The world has changed. None of us can go back. All we can do is our best. And sometimes the best that we can do is to start over.
I saw all these people die. I keep telling everybody they should move on. Some do, but not us.
Even if there's a small chance, we owe this to everyone who's not in this room to try.
We will. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. I like this one.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
A crummy commercial? Son of a bitch.
Hey guys, this is Carlos, and I just wanted to tell you guys how amazing this process of starting a podcast has been for me. Movies have always been such a passion of mine, and now I have an outlet for that passion. Speaking of which, do you have a passion you want to share with the world? Are you interested in starting a podcast? Or have you already taken your passion to the next level and started your own business that revolves around that passion? Whatever the passion, whatever the business, you know how important getting your name out there is. I just came across a company who's willing to help you do just that. It's called Evolved Curations. Evolved Curations is dedicated to helping business owners, creators, and influencers reach their goals by giving you access to their team of experts who can help in areas such as social media management, web design, and so much more. Check them out at evolvedcurations.com. That's evolvedcurations.com. And don't forget to tell them that Carlos from Goat Movie sent you. All right, there you have it, guys. The trailer for Avengers Endgame. Like I said, this is a 3-hour long movie, so make sure that you go to the restroom before you go. And be cautious with what you order. If you order a large drink and some popcorn, I mean, you may end up leaving the theater to go to the bathroom, but I highly doubt it because you're going to be so into it. Absolutely loved it. Before we go any further, here is our spoiler alert.
Red alert!
If you have not seen the movie, be sure to pause the podcast, guys, and go and see this movie immediately. Once you see the movie, come on back and pick up where you left off. That way there are no spoilers. Anything discussed after this is completely fair game. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this. We all knew from the first Avengers. Well, actually, before we actually get into that, I need to issue an apology. And Brian, you know what I'm talking about. I have to issue an apology to Mike. Big Mike, I am so sorry. I absolutely did miss it. I think I was traumatized from it. Doctor Strange did disappear in the snap. And I know that this was one of our first podcasts. Mike was actually supposed to be on the podcast today to cover Avengers Endgame, but unfortunately was not able to attend at the last minute. So, Mike, here is my formal apology to you. Doctor Strange did disappear at the end of Avengers Infinity War. So, I apologize, buddy. But we all knew that somebody was going to die in this one. And I think it was very fitting for it to be Tony Stark. We started with Tony. We're ending with Tony. I thought it was a very, very touching moment. I actually did get very, very misty-eyed. Or should I say I got something stuck in my eye during that time, during that scene. But what did you guys think? Do you think... Let's just open it up. What do you guys think about the movie? What were some of your favorite scenes? What did you think about Tony being the one that passed away?
Yay.
Really?
I'm still Team Cap all the way.
Oh, no. Brian, my respect has gone down for you just a teeny tiny bit. I was always Team Stark.
Yeah, Tony screwed up enough. It's time for him to pay. The only way they got me emotionally invested in Tony's death was by giving him the most adorable little girl.
Oh, yeah. Morgan was absolutely adorable. I absolutely loved it. I loved how she came out with her little Iron Man that she had found in the garage. So I thought that was really fitting. And I absolutely knew that was going to feed into the later scene with Pepper finally taking her mantle. I forgot what her name was because I know in the comic book series she actually becomes an Iron Man, or should I say Iron Woman? I don't even know what her name. I think they call her Rescue.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw that coming, and that was really great for that. But Morgan is absolutely, absolutely adorable. And we actually hear her referenced in Avengers Infinity War when Tony at the very opening says that he dreamt about having a child and that they wanted to name her, or him actually, after Pepper's eccentric uncle named Morgan. And I also found out that Morgan in the comic book series is actually Tony's angry or jealous cousin or something like that, which I thought was pretty interesting. That's one of those little Easter eggs that I think might be a little bit of a stretch, but hey, it is what it is. What did you guys think, JB, Tim?
So if I were to pick the part of the movie that affected me the most, now I'm a girl, I'm not going to lie, I cried through most of it. I took my own box of Kleenex in with me, and I used about half of it. But when I look back, when I went to see it the second time, I think what really hit me was Thor's part of this whole movie. And, everybody was laughing and making fun of him because he's fat and whatever. And, he played this big jokey part of the movie. But to me, he was the most real character in that movie because that's what happens to people when they lose their way.
Mm-hmm.
He took it all on himself, that it was his fault that it happened because he didn't kill Thanos before he snapped his fingers. He felt that he let everybody down, and then he gets a chance to redeem himself and chops Thanos' head off, and it didn't matter. And so he just sunk down into a depression. And I mean, that's what happens to real people. So to me, like kind of watching him go through that and not snapping out of it until he goes back to be able to talk to his mom, that's real life. Like that happens all the time. And I felt like that was the most, I don't know, emotional part of the movie for me because people can relate to that. People can't relate to Iron
So I
Man.
guess my question to you on that would be, do you think it was real, like the most emotional part, do you think it was more where Thor and the Hulk are having that conversation and Hulk basically thanked him for helping the Hulk out of it in Ragnarok? Or are you talking about more the scene where Thor is finally talking with... Because Thor knows that his mom's going to die that day, and she even knows that something's coming up, but she doesn't know what, and she doesn't want to mess with the timeline, and she even tells him, no, you don't have anything to tell me. But they did share a very, very sweet, tender moment. I know I'm a mama's boy. Shout out, Mama. I love you very much. So which one was more emotional for you? Was it the Hulk and Thor scene, or was it the Riga and Thor scene?
I don't necessarily know that it was either of those scenes. I think it's just the transformation he goes through from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie, where he finally gets back on his path and he helps them do what he needs to do, reclaims the hammer so Cap can use it. And, it's just kind of an example of how us as people can be in these really bad, terrible places and then get pulled out and go, find your way again. So it was a very human way to portray the God of Thunder in that movie, and I really liked it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they kind of took him back to his original persona, the frat boy jock.
Right.
Except now he's lost everyone who kept him on track or guided him. He has no one left.
I'm actually very glad that you guys have said that. And, if you've listened to the podcast, if you listened to the last one, I made a vow to make sure that I try to use this platform to bring awareness to mental health. And I'm so glad that you said that, Jessica, because I think mental health is something that is very taboo in our society today. And I don't want to take this podcast into like a, sad, sappy kind of thing, but I do want to bring attention to mental health. Depression is a very real thing. And if you're looking for help, I strongly suggest that people reach out. And I have to agree with you 150% that was a very real thing. With that being said, I know Brian and I had talked about it off the podcast that Tony, when they finally find Tony and he's, completely and totally depleted, he's so skinny, he's sitting down, they finally save him, Captain Marvel saves him, and he's, confronting everybody. He has this breakdown to the point where they have to sedate him. And I had made a note saying, Tony is really suffering from post-traumatic stress. And, Brian was the one that reminded me, well, yeah, he's been having that since Iron Man 3, which is true. But I feel like it kind of just all culminated here at this last because he was at the very, very bottom. He was just having kind of anxiety attacks. And yes, he had a little bit of post-traumatic stress. But I think this is where it all really just exploded for him. And with you mentioning that, Jessica, it makes me feel like, oh my gosh, all of them have PTSD, and really Thor is really, really struggling with this. And he did, and I'm now realizing it a little bit more with your comments on what he's saying. And when you take into consideration all the nods that they make to funny or things from the 80s, some of the greatest movies, throughout the whole thing, they're talking about time travel and they make reference to Back to the Future and Time Cop and all these movies that have to deal with it. I really enjoyed it because one of the first things that I said when I saw Fat Thor is, oh my gosh, he looks just like the Big Lebowski, the dude, And I really thought it was hilarious because I said that right before Tony's all like, what's the deal with Lebowski over there? So, I mean, just all these little nods and references that they make to other movies, that's the type of stuff that I really look forward to.
Yeah, but PTSD has been a recurring theme in Marvel movies and TV shows now for a while. I mean, think about Sam Wilson's introduction. When Cap goes to see him, he's talking to all those veterans, trying to help them reintegrate into society. And Marvel used it in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the spin-off from Iron Man 3, where that's where they're recruiting bad guys, is from the disaffected veterans who are coming back who don't have anything.
That's a very good point, Brian, and I really appreciate the way that Marvel brings attention to these things that really, instead of just throwing it out there like a lot of other movies, like just saying like, "Hey, look at me over here," they kind of subtly do it, and I really appreciate it, the way that they did that. One of the things that I know is going on a lot in our world is this whole LGBTQ community, awareness and stuff like that. And there was actually a reference to it in this movie as well. And it was another Easter egg where actually one of the directors, Joe Russo, makes an appearance in the movie, and he is in the circle with Captain America where they're all discussing their trauma after the snap. And he is one of the first, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from all the research I've done, he's one of the first characters in the MCU to be portrayed as a gay character. So they didn't flat out say, "Oh, look at me, I'm gay, I'm over here, look at this." They did it kind of subtly. They were talking about how he had finally gone on a date with a man and that he, was crying after dessert, but that he was still going to go after him and that people were moving on. So I really appreciate the way that the MCU has brought attention to a lot of different things that need to be said in our world and that need to be talked about a little bit more without full-blown, political correctness or political agendas or anything like that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I like the way they just made it part of the world. It's not, you don't have to shine a bright light on it. It's just part of the world like everything else.
It's just there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that the director is the one who's like, all right, I'm going to be the one who does this.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Hey guys, this is Carlos, and I just want to take a moment to let you know that it's okay not to be okay. As someone who suffers from depression and anxiety, I know what it's like not to be okay. I've lost friends and loved ones to drugs and suicide brought on by depression and anxiety, and I want to make sure that I shed light on an issue that sometimes is swept under the rug. I want to make sure that me and my show do our part to make a difference. If you know someone who may be having suicidal thoughts or tendencies, or you yourself may be battling some demons, be sure to reach out. Remember, you can always reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline by dialing 1-800-273-8255 or by visiting suicidepreventionlifeline.org and chat with someone online. Remember, 1-800-273-8255 or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. The Lifeline provides 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, prevention and crisis resources for you or your loved ones, and best practices for professionals. We can all prevent suicide, and again, it's okay not to be okay. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple of other things. I know there's one thing that Brian, you and I wanted to talk about a little bit. In my inexperience as a movie director, I did not really like the way that this movie opened. It opens with Barton teaching his daughter how to shoot the arrow, and then, we go into the snap and stuff like that. And then you have the Avengers logo star in the movie, and then you cut to Tony being out in space and talking and all that. In my professional opinion, or unprofessional opinion, however you want to call it, I would have started with Tony in the ship and everything, Avengers logo, music, and then cut to Barton and his daughter. I feel like that would have been a better transition because Avengers Infinity War kind of ended with Tony and being like, oh my gosh, what the hell happened? And I think it would have been better if that's the way that it would started. But Brian, you actually had a better idea of how that should have happened.
I give my wife Amy credit for this. When we left Infinity War, she's like, Hawkeye wasn't in the movie. The last post-credit scene should have been his family getting snapped. That's what she wanted. She wanted total devastation and then wait a year for the next movie.
And when you and I talked about that, I thought, oh my gosh, that would have been great. That should have been the very final post-credit scene, Hawkeye and all that. Now, while we're on the subject of Hawkeye, we saw that he had an ankle bracelet, and that's how they explained him and the Hulk Scott Lang not being in the other movies, that they had taken a plea deal and were under house arrest. So with the snap, and then later Barton becomes this, vigilante who's also part of the comic books, and I think they call him not Ronin, but they call him something else.
Ronin.
It is Ronin. Yeah, he becomes this vigilante and he starts killing everybody and kind of becomes this anti-hero. Who the hell took off his bracelet? Who was monitoring him at that point?
I'm not going to say he doesn't have an arrow that will just take it off for him.
I'm sure, right? The other thing that really bothered me about this movie is it was just a kind of, oh my gosh, 5 years later. I felt kind of like a SpongeBob scene where in SpongeBob they're like 1 hour later. It's just like 5 years later.
But they did it by saying 5, and everyone's like, okay, maybe it's days, weeks, and then you hit the years. It's like, whoa.
It is true. As soon as I saw the word years, there was a small gasp for me. I was like, holy cow, this is really going on. And before we jump into that, and I'm sorry, I know we keep jumping around. When they first went to go see Thanos in the garden, that Thor cut his head off, I for sure thought, okay, this is Thanos using one of the stones to get the jump on them.
Yeah, I expected them all to die.
I know. I saw the 5 years later. I was like, oh, that is not where they're going with this. Oh my gosh. So there was a small gasp once I saw Thanos dead. And then once I saw that it was 5 years later, I was like, holy cow, this is where we're going. So with that being said, with Scott Lang first coming up to Cassie grew up a lot in 5 years.
Yeah, definitely agree. I thought she was a little too old.
But you had a theory about that.
I just assume Cassie's older than we thought, and she's just small for her age.
And I mean, we never saw her parents. We never saw her mom. So I'm wondering if her mom disappeared with the snap and Cassie was left to raise herself for 5 years, or what happened there. I don't think that was something that was really well addressed. Not really a big thing, but still, I mean, she grew up a lot in 5 years. The other thing that we were going to go ahead and talk about, and Brian, you made a pretty funny comment about this, is the way that they explain Scott Lang coming back from the quantum realm. You know, with all these complicated quantum sequencing and calculations that have to be done and everything, the fate of the entire universe falls to a rat hitting the sequencing in just the particular order or hitting just the right button to bring Scott back. I mean, really, that's how they're going to explain all of this. And you had a pretty funny comment, Brian. You were talking about that maybe that was one of the 14 million or whatever.
Yeah, how many times did Doctor Strange watch that rat miss?
I know, and he's just sitting there like, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. So, I mean, seriously, and maybe you're right. Maybe that's what he was seeing, before he snapped away. Again, sorry, Mike. I really am sorry about that. How did you guys feel about the fate of the universe falling to a rat?
I mean, so I was reading something yesterday that Joe Russo was giving an interview to some Chinese social media website. Mm-hmm. And that's what he said. He goes, if you're going to pick the MVP of the movie, it was the rat. Which I thought was pretty funny that they, as they're making this movie, that's what they're thinking. And then we go to watch it and we're like, are you kidding? Like, out of all the things that could happen, this rat stepping on the buttons in the right sequence is what allowed that one opportunity for them to beat Thanos.
But that is Ken Jeong, right? The security guard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is Ken Jeong,
yeah. Yeah, that was pretty funny.
What were some other scenes that you guys want to talk about? Something that, that you guys enjoyed?
So I want to bring it up because I'm sure it's going to be a hot button topic, but
America's ass? Yeah, it is going to be a hot topic.
That's self-explanatory. I don't think we have to
right.
talk about it.
What's your hot topic?
So when I left the theater, obviously after I stopped crying enough to walk out, the one thing I thought was, I love Captain America. He's great. I love all the movies. I love the character. But to me, it kind of seemed like Captain America wouldn't have shirked his duties to go back in time and live his life out with Peggy Carter, even though him going back in time starts an alternate path of reality. So maybe life didn't happen the same way it did before.
Alternate path where he stops Bucky and JFK doesn't get assassinated.
Right. And it just like to me,
Tony grows up with a dad.
it just seems like Captain America, like that doesn't seem like that's his character. He's the person who steps in and does everything, regardless if it's hard. So I know they did it because Chris Evans was done and they wanted to give Captain America a proper send off. But part of it just kind of felt like I just feel like he wouldn't have done that.
So it's interesting that you say that because I actually agree with you. And there was a lot, that was one of the plot holes. I don't want to say that. I guess the only way that I can say it is that I've always been interested, not just in movies, but in quantum mechanics. It's not like I've studied it in theory or anything like that, but that stuff has always interested me, and paradoxes. And, if you go back in the past, does it really change the future and stuff like that? So one of those things that I called out, or that I had a problem with, is exactly what you're saying. And I would have to say that I think because he knew that Captain America was actually frozen during those times, and he knew that he couldn't mess with the timeline. I think that's where it is. He knew how Peggy Carter passed, and I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, when he's sitting next to her and she passes and he's holding her hand, I don't think that she had ever said that she remarried or that she met anybody.
No, the
I know
Russos set that up in Winter Soldier. If you remember when he goes to the museum and he's looking at the Captain America exhibit, he sees Peggy talking, and she says that he saved the man who would become my husband, but she never mentions the name.
Exactly. Oh, I forgot. Oh, so maybe that was it. Maybe the man that became her husband was him.
That's my takeaway, because they left that really vague.
Because she couldn't talk about it, and we know Peggy could keep a secret. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but the only thing I will say that, again, it's a plot hole, is Captain America is fighting Thanos in the final scene. Thanos breaks the shield into pieces, which then, here's another question. If nothing can break vibranium, does that mean that Thanos' sword is made from vibranium, which would mean it would be available in other places in the universe?
It crashed Earth in a meteor.
It did. So, again, I'm assuming that Thanos' sword is made of vibranium.
And T'Challa was able to scratch it.
But all his stuff is made of vibranium as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that shield is broken, he ends up giving the shield to the Falcon, which means he would have had to taken it during the time that he was married to Peggy, which then would leave.
He made a new one.
Maybe he asked them to make another one. But I thought that they had said in one of the movies that was all that vibranium that we had.
Well, that was all the vibranium outside Wakanda.
But not in Wakanda. They had a lot. I mean, they had...
In Wakanda, yeah. So I'm assuming he would have had to break the timeline again, go to Wakanda, ask them to make another one, and then give it up. Which then leads to another plot hole, is Mjolnir. The Thor takes it, brings it back, Captain wields it, and then they stay with it. They never return any of those weapons. So then how does Thor do all that, which causes another paradox, right? Which then leads to a third question, is that in Age of Ultron, Captain America almost lifts the hammer, but then doesn't. So what has changed between Age of Ultron and now that he can wield it?
Maybe he faked it because he didn't want to make Thor feel bad.
No,
I'll go with that.
Only somebody worthy can pick up the hammer.
Well, why would he have not been worthy during Age of Ultron, but wind up being worthy in Endgame? I mean, he's the same person.
No, he's not the same person. If anything, he's become more crude. And in my opinion, Captain America has actually given up. He's accepted the fact that they lost. Because, and I made a note of this, when Scarlett Johansson is having her meeting with everybody, all the holograms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they finish and everything, she starts crying. She's eating her peanut butter sandwich, and Captain America says, "Hey, I was going to invite you to dinner, but I didn't want to. It looks like you're suffering enough as it is." She makes a very vague comment, which leads me to believe that he did give up. She says, "Are you here just to do your laundry?" And then he says, "And to visit a friend." Which also, why wouldn't Captain America be leading that meeting? If he's the one in charge, he should be sitting in that chair and coordinating with everybody.
He's still a war criminal.
Well, so was Nat.
Well, and it's all this whole movie was about role reversal.
Absolutely.
Instead of Captain America being the positive one, we can do it, we can do it, we can do it. He's not. And now Tony Stark's being the more positive one because he's come up with the solution to be able to travel through the quantum realm to go back and get the stones. So he's leading the positive side of this. And Cap is now taking on Tony Stark's normal role and
of throwing caution to the wind.
Exactly. So it's kind of cool because you don't see either of those two like that before this movie.
And I completely agree with you. They completely and totally switch roles. Captain America, all of a sudden, he starts using foul language left and right. I couldn't believe that. And he has kind of thrown caution to the wind and is now desperately trying to win at any cost. Whereas Tony before, trying to quote unquote put that shield of armor around the world, and throwing caution to the wind. Now he's like, wait, we don't want to mess with time. I can't do this. We can't do this. And he's the one that
has stakes. Tony has a daughter. Before, he didn't have anything to lose.
Right.
That's true.
And Cap's lost everything. He doesn't have anything keeping him tethered anymore. He's lost Bucky. He's lost Sam. He's lost Peggy.
And the thing about it is that also, you've got, how do I say this? I feel like because he's thrown caution, like he's kind of given up and it is this role reversal. That's the only reason, Jessica, that I would say he kind of thought to himself, you know what? I've already lived one life. I'm going to take this one for myself. And that's why he stayed with Peggy.
Because that's what Tony has always been telling him this entire time. You need to get a life, Yeah,
he keeps saying he needs to move on.
Yeah, there's more out there than what you're doing. So, I mean, in that part, that ending was kind of cool because it was a culmination of all of that. But, again, it's just, Captain America's more Iron Man in this movie and Iron Man's more Captain America.
Let's just get one thing straight, Jessica. There is only one Iron Man. Only one.
I'll tell you what, the funniest part of that movie was when Cap sees Cap from New York and he's got the thing and he's punching him in the face and the old Captain America's like, I can do this all day. And he's like, yeah, I know. Man, yeah. I laughed out loud for a good 5 minutes. I thought
that's
that
one
was
of the things I loved about this movie, though, is right before that they reprised the elevator scene from Winter Soldier.
That was great.
Oh, yeah. And we were all expecting a lot.
Now he's changed enough that instead of punching his way out, he's thinking.
Absolutely. And that's actually a nod to the comic book series where in the comic books, there was a very controversial comic that was sent out showing that Captain America was actually always a Nazi soldier and he says Hail Hydra in the comics. So this was really an ode to that because that's how he ends up getting away with it here in this elevator scene rather than fighting his way out. Really enjoyed that scene. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple of other things. I want to know, how the heck did Red Skull become this all-knowing person? Because he didn't wield the Knowledge Stone. He handled the Tesseract, which was just a space, and it sent him to Vormir. So how does all of a sudden he know everybody, he knows their parents, and all of a sudden he's this all-knowing guy?
Because he's not technically Red Skull anymore. He's a completely different character. So, everybody talks about how would Captain America have reacted when he had to go back to Vormir and drop back off the Soul Stone because of his interactions with Red Skull in the first Captain America. It's not the same Red Skull. That guy's just basically there to guard the stone. He knows who everybody is because that's his curse. But it's not the same character.
He's guarding a temple up at the top, so there's got to be some way for him to inherit or be taught that knowledge.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, Captain America is charged with the task of returning all the stones. And from what we see, from the conversation that we see between Bruce Banner and the Sorcerer Supreme, the stones have to be replaced exactly when they were taken. So do you think, A, how does Captain America know where or when Hawkeye and Black Widow took the stone, or Nebula and Rhodey took the stone, right? How is he going to know that?
It's all programmed into their
into
their little
bands.
GPS thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that being said, A, how do you return the Soul Stone? Because it just appears out of nowhere. And B, do you think this is going to feed into the bringing back Nat and Gamora?
Nope. Joe Russo said she's dead. She's
Nat's
not coming
out.
back.
And we have the 2014 Gamora out there somewhere,
Right.
so
You
they
don't
have an
have to
option
worry
there.
about her. Yeah. But yeah, Nat's dead. So her her solo movie is going to be a prequel.
But the 2014 Gamora ends up dying in 2017.
But
or
she's
2018.
she's now in a different reality.
Ah. Which then leads to our next point, ladies and gentlemen. Do you like how all this is coming full circle and connecting to one another?
I loved it.
I know. So Tony
they basically referenced every single previous movie at some point. There was some visual or verbal call out. I mean, Thor expostulating on, let me tell you about Thor the Dark World. That was hysterical.
Oh, hilarious, hilarious. So my next thing is, Tony and the Ant-Man screw up at their first attempt of getting the Tesseract, which then leads to Loki getting the Tesseract again, right? And then disappearing. Now, Jessica, you and I have had this conversation before where you think this is going to feed into the upcoming Loki series that's to air on Disney Plus or Netflix or something like that, right?
Yeah, the Disney streaming service.
I agree.
So then how does that not cause another branch? Because that Tesseract was never returned. They had to go all the way back to 1970. No, because that Tesseract originally, right, would have either gone with the director or whatever,
right,
after the big New York battle scene, right?
Right.
But then Tony and Ant-Man interject, and then Loki disappears.
Yeah, right. So that causes that would cause another branch off of the reality. The same way it happened when Cap went back to be with Peggy. It's another branch of reality. So on that timeline, Loki doesn't get captured after New York. He escapes with the Tesseract. So that's a completely different timeline.
Either that
the
or
comics have never cared about this. It's only people now who are like, oh, everything has to wrap up. Comic books are like, nope, we don't care at all.
Exactly.
We have 3,000 realities going at the same time. We've got 8 different versions of Spider-Man running around. Now they're not worried.
Yep.
That's true. That is very, very true. A couple of other things that I want to make reference to is I got to give a shout out to all the females in Marvel. What did you think about the girl power? All the females fighting all in one scene. What did you think? I'm gonna give it up here to you, Jessica.
Well, now, I love all the girls in the MCU, obviously. They're all awesome. I didn't think it needed to be as blatant as it was because, when you're fighting in a scene like that, you don't probably have all the girls together at the same time, So it was a little bit on the nose. It was cool because you're influencing a whole new generation of little girls who are going to get into superhero movies who might not have before. So for that part, I really like it. And, all the girl characters right now are pretty great. So
they are, and they're very good at that. So
plus, that was another emotional punch to the gut when you realize Black Widow's not there.
That's true. That's true. Tim, you seem to be a little bit quiet here, man. What are your thoughts on this?
No, that was fine. I didn't have a problem with that. I like all of them. I thought they should have used Valkyrie more. I mean, she's supposed to be one of the best fighters in all of
Asgard.
Yeah. And, they didn't do a whole lot with her, but that was kind of cool. Rescue was awesome. I mean, the fact that they all got together and all the girls from Black Panther got together from Wakanda, that was pretty cool too. I didn't have a problem with it. It was awesome.
That's cool. One of the things that I want to see your guys' take on is how do you feel about I'm kind of disappointed that Deadpool didn't make a little cameo. I'm really curious to see how he would have played into all of this, or if he even disappeared with the snap.
We were hoping for Wolverine. Just bring everybody in. That would
just everybody.
But yeah,
So-
that scene where you literally have everybody, it looked like something that came out of one of those giant 2-page comic panels. It was just amazing.
It's like when you're a kid and you have all your toys in one bucket. That's what they did. They just emptied out that bucket. They just turned it over and everybody was there. Now, one person that I was really kind of upset that I didn't see is one of my favorite extras, or one of my favorite side characters, my man, my blood, Mexican pride, Michael Pena, Luis. Luis didn't come out in this movie at all. They let what's her name, Michelle Pfeiffer, make a small appearance at the funeral scene. They even showed the little teenager, and I didn't know who it was until you told me, Jessica, from Iron Man 3. He was at the funeral for Tony, but my man Luis Pena, he wasn't there. What the heck?
Not a superhero, man.
Neither was that
They
little
got too many
little
people.
kid.
But he has an emotional connection to Tony.
He must be in the future, or there's no reason for him to be there.
That's true.
We talked about that when he left. If you leave him out of that scene, nobody's going to say, "Hey, where was that kid from Iron Man 3?" Everybody forgot about that kid, so he must have a role going forward.
Some of us didn't even recognize him. That's for me. That was me for sure. But I think it was you, Brian, that had said that maybe that's going to play into the next Ant-Man or something, and that's going to be the comic relief where he kind of recaps everything. You know how that's his gimmick in Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp. He kind of reiterates everything in that funny voice that, yeah, he was mad, So maybe that'll play into the next.
Do something with it.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite scenes is where Happy Hogan is sitting with Morgan after the funeral, and they make reference to the cheeseburgers and that she wants cheeseburgers. That goes back to Iron Man, where they rescue him from being overseas, and that he's, come up with the arc reactor, and he says the first thing he wants to do is get some cheeseburgers. So that's really just, I love how they brought it all full circle.
Yeah, I think you need to have Jon Favreau in the movie just to say, hey, you made the first movie that worked.
It did.
We've got to have you in this one to wrap it up.
It really did. So I absolutely, absolutely loved it. Let's go ahead and start wrapping up with this, guys, because we have covered so much information. I mean, this movie has a lot of stuff to cover. And one thing I will say is that everybody got just enough screen time without being overbearing. I think they pulled it off very, very, very well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and give each one of you an opportunity to wrap up your favorite thoughts, or your favorite scenes, some of your final thoughts. And then after we've discussed all this, are you going to stick with your current rating? Let's go ahead and start with you, Tim. Final thoughts, favorite scene, and final score.
My favorite scene was when when Doctor Strange brought everybody back. The battle scene is kind of at its apex, and we think it's a turning point, and then all of Doctor Strange just brings these light bubbles around, or whatever they are, and everybody starts coming through, and you just see one after the other, and armies of people come back, and that was the best part. That was awesome. The score at that point was awesome. Everything was great.
Absolutely. So, I got chills during that scene. Did you notice that the scavengers came through too?
Yeah, that was great. I mean, like I said, everybody from all movies came back. Like he was saying, there's a shout out to every movie in that little one scene. It was great. I thought the battle scenes could have been longer. I didn't think they were as good as Infinity War, but that's just me. And I'm sticking with my score, 8.5.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Jessica?
So I will say I'm kind of torn. I really like the scene with old Cap and new Cap, because I thought it was pretty funny to watch him fight himself. Because really, he's the only one who does that of everybody who went back in time. He's the only one who really had to have any kind of hand-to-hand combat with himself when he went back. So I really like that. But I also clearly I'm a Guardians of the Galaxy fan, so when Star-Lord sees Gamora and he goes up to her and she kicks him twice, and he's like, "You missed me the first time and you got him both the second time." Oh my gosh, dude, I love it.
I love Chris Pratt's wittiness. He and Paul Rudd are absolutely masters of wit, so he's absolutely great. I love that scene as well. Does your score change at all, or any final thoughts?
No, I'm good. I mean, a 9 for me is a pretty good movie, so I'm still a good solid 9.
And that's even after seeing it twice in theaters. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Let's go and wrap up with you, Brian. What do you think?
Well, my biggest problem with this movie is that Thanos with no Infinity Stones is more powerful, and he's kicking Thor, Iron Man, and Cap's butt, and it just seemed like they had to overpower him to accomplish whatever they were trying to accomplish there. But my favorite scene is when Mjolnir starts to quiver, and you realize Thor's hand hasn't moved, and you know it's Cap picking it up and then just going and kicking Thanos' butt with it. That I could watch that over and over on a loop. I think my other favorite scene would be when Hawkeye goes back to test it, and they kind of shoot the scene through the slats in the barn, so you get that sepia tone, and so you're not really sure what's going on. Why does it look different? So I thought that was a really cool cinematography move they did there. No, it doesn't change my score. Overpowered Thanos keeps me from going to a 10.
So your final score being?
9.5.
9.5. Awesome. Well, my score is not changing whatsoever. Again, I think this was an absolutely well-made movie. I love all of the comedy scenes. What's the name of that rock character that's always with Thor?
Org.
I completely love Org. I love the Fortnite scene, especially when Thor takes the headset and he starts threatening the kid. And Brian, you had said something that actually is an actual user.
I saw an article where someone went and found, I think he's an Xbox user with that username.
I absolutely love it. I love his comedy. He was one of the very, very few characters that I enjoyed in Thor Ragnarok. I absolutely love this movie. And of course, I got to give a shout out to my favorite character, Doctor Strange. He's always my favorite, even though, like, I'm going to agree with what you told me, Brian. I was just so shocked that he disappeared that I decided to mentally erase that from my memory. So again, sorry, Michael.
Sorry, Mike.
He did disappear, but he did come back. He did come back.
Is it weird that no one on this entire hour we've been talking has said anything about Captain Marvel being in the movie?
Oh, I know, right?
She's got such a small role.
And
I honestly thought she was going to be so much bigger.
It's good, though. Like, I don't think she should have had a huge role because she's brand new to this.
Doesn't really have that Earth attachment like everybody else does.
And they also they call that out in the movie. They called it out. They're like, "Excuse me, new blood, you're new to this. Like, we're invested in this way more." Absolutely. So good call out there, Jessica. Absolutely. Not that she didn't need to be in the movie. She absolutely did. But I was honestly kind of shocked that she didn't have a much bigger role than what she did. So doesn't change my score at all. 9.5 all the way. I really want to take the time to thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate all your input. Jessica, Tim, Brian, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for joining me. And I want to thank everybody for coming back to listening to the podcast. I'm so sorry. There's a lot of stuff that was going on that I wasn't able to put a podcast out sooner. So that's going to do it for this edition of GOAT Movies that is now 1 year old. Woohoo! Woo-hoo! So happy birthday, GOAT Movies. So excited and look forward to more and more podcasts coming soon. There's going to be a lot more in production. If you have a movie that you would like for me to review, go ahead and shoot me an email at goatmoviespc@gmail.com. That's goatmovies, plural, pc@gmail.com. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at goatmovies. I'm always putting out different things through the storyline where you guys get to vote and get your input, stuff like that, at goatmoviespc. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.